The long winter had settled over the north, quiet and cold like a breath held too long. The snows blanketed Winterfell, hiding the bloodstains that never quite faded from its stones. Men thought the wars were over. That peace, hard-won and brittle, had finally returned. But peace is just silence before a scream. And somewhere in the Godswood, Bran Stark sat still beneath the heart tree, his eyes clouded with time and secrets. Watching. Always watching. He didn't speak much anymore. People called him the Three-Eyed, even a name heavy with mystery, but none of them really understood what it meant, not even his own family. Arya kept her distance. Sansa ruled from the north with sharpness in her eyes and weariness in her heart. Jon Snow, if he even still went by that name, had exiled himself beyond the wall, where ghosts and regrets walked hand in hand. All of them had survived the war. But none of them had escaped Bran's gaze. Bran wasn't just watching the past. He was shaping it, bending it, twisting it to ensure his future. It had started slowly, a whisper in the wind here, a raven's call there. Small things, a nudge to Hodor's mind that had broken him, a flash of a vision that led Arya to the dagger. The moment Sam happened to discover Jon's true parentage in a book that should have been lost to fire. Coincidences, they all thought. But Bran had no use for coincidence. He'd seen the end. He was the end. From the day he fell from that tower, Bran had changed. The fall broke more than just his body. It opened something inside him. When the three-eyed raven took him beyond the wall, he wasn't just taught to see time. He was taught to use it. And he had. Every step, every death, every betrayal, it was all a line on the map, leading to one throne, one future. His. He had let the Mad Queen burn King's Landing. He had said nothing as Jon stabbed Daenerys through the heart, because it all had to happen, because chaos was the ladder, and he needed everyone to fall before he could rise. Even now, sitting silently in that ancient wheelchair, Bran was never idle. His eyes would turn white at odd hours, his mind leaping through ages, watching kings be born and butchered, choosing where to drop a pebble so the ripples would grow. His body remained in Winterfell, but his reach stretched beyond mountains and oceans. He had seen Tyrion's doubts, tasted the wine that soured on his tongue when he realized the counsel had been played. He had felt Varys's fear as the flames consumed him, realizing too late that Bran had seen the Raven Scrolls, had let them fly, just enough to push Dany into madness. He had heard Jaime Lannister's last breath as the Red Keep crushed him, and his sister crushed love and guilt and redemption in one cruel moment. All paths led to one truth. Bran had been behind it all, but power never comes without a price. Each time Bran warged too long, too deep, he lost a piece of himself. A memory, a feeling, a name. At times, even he wondered if Bran Stark still existed at all, or if the boy had died beneath that tower and something else had taken root in his place, something colder, older. Still, he remained king, crowned by a council too tired to fight, too blind to see the truth. And yet one night, as the wind howled through the battlements and the moon cast long shadows over the courtyard, something shifted. Arya returned, unexpected and unannounced, her eyes unreadable. She stood before Bran's throne of wood and steel, and for the first time in a long while, his lips moved. "You've come to kill me," he said, almost amused. "No," Arya replied, her voice like frostbite. "I've come to ask why." Bran didn't blink. He never did anymore. His eyes, deep, hollow, ancient, watched Arya the way a storm watches a ship, silent, patient, always knowing how it ends. Arya stood firm, her face unreadable, but something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, never fear, but conflict. She had killed men for less, kings, monsters, even gods in human skin. But this wasn't just her brother anymore. Or maybe he never was. I've seen too much, Bran finally said. That's your answer. That's not an answer, Arya snapped, stepping closer, her hand grazing the hilt of her blade out of habit, not intent. Yet, you let Daenerys burn children. You let Jon fall into exile. You watched everything go to hell and just sat here like some ghost in a chair. You could have stopped it, could I? He tilted his head slightly. If I had stopped it, I wouldn't be here. None of us would be. Arya's jaw tightened. So you played God? I became him. The words hit her like a slap, and yet Bran said it without pride. No arrogance, no malice. Just truth, cold, blunt, final. He continued, I didn't lie, Arya. I never lied. I told them all. I live in the past. I see everything, and still they gave me the crown. They didn't know what you really were, she whispered. No, but they needed someone who could see the future, and the only way to make the future I saw was to become it. Arya took a breath, steady, sharp. Her knuckles tightened around her belt. You sent me away, across the sea. I saved you, Bran said. You would have died here like the rest. You were too wild, too alive. She stared at him for a long moment. You sent me away so I wouldn't see what you were doing. That too. Silence settled between them again, but this time it wasn't the silence of peace. It was a question hanging in the air, neither of them willing to say it yet. Finally, Arya's voice dropped low. Did you kill Jon? Bran didn't react. I didn't have to. Jon Snow was a sacrifice the realm demanded. A man with Targaryen blood, Stark loyalty, and no desire for power. He was too dangerous. So I gave him a way out. Peace, north of the wall, with no throne, no war. He'll live longer than any of us. You made him a ghost, Arya said bitterly. Same as you. Bran's voice softened, just a little. He made his choice. I made mine. She looked at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. What are you now, Bran? He paused. Then, almost kindly, I don't know. But I remember what I was, and I remember who tried to hurt the people I loved. She flinched slightly, the way he said it, like a memory, not a threat. The Night King? She asked. I lured him here, Bran said simply. Arya's breath caught. You used me. I gave you the moment, he said. You chose what to do with it. And what about the rest? Cersei, Jaime, Varys, Tyrion? They all served their purpose. You sound just like Littlefinger. Bran's eyes didn't change. Littlefinger played games. I rewrote the board. That was it. That was the crack. Arya stepped back, not out of fear, but something deeper. A feeling that the boy she once knew had been buried under too much time, too much vision. What sat before her was no longer her brother. It wore his face. It knew his memories, but it had outgrown them like dead skin. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally. Because you're the only one who can kill me, Bran said. And I need to know if you will. The fire behind Arya's eyes dimmed, conflicted, torn. I don't want to, she whispered. I know, he said. That's why you might be the right one. She stared at him for a long time, then turned and walked away. Into the cold, into the dark, into the storm that never really left Winterfell. And Bran just closed his eyes. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Far beyond the wall, where snow never melts and silence hangs heavier than air, Jon Snow lived among ghosts. Not the kind that groaned and moaned in haunted castles. Real ones, regrets, faces in dreams, names spoken only in memory. Daenerys, Ygritte, ghost who never left his side. The North had welcomed him like a forgotten son, returning home, but even here, in the wilds where men become myth, peace refused to find him. He had shed the crown, the title, the burden of blood. But some things don't stay buried, especially when they're still alive. It started with the dreams, vivid, sharp. He saw Winterfell, but not as it was. Smoke curled from the towers, people fled in panic, and something darker than shadow crept through the halls. And always, at the center of it all, Bran, not as the quiet boy he once knew, but as something more. A figure without age, sitting atop a throne of bones, watching the world burn. Jon would wake drenched in sweat despite the freezing cold, and every time Ghost would be standing alert, growling softly at nothing in the dark. "Bad dreams again?" Tormund asked one morning while gutting a snow hare for breakfast. Jon nodded, wiping his face. "Worse than usual." "You always were too noble for your own good," Tormund muttered. "Maybe you're dreaming of things you should have done." Jon didn't answer. He couldn't, because deep down he knew the dreams weren't just dreams. The gods were trying to show him something, or someone was. Days later, a rider came through the northern pass, half dead, frostbitten, rambling about visions and whispers. In the woods, the free folk nearly left him to die, but Jon saw the emblem stitched onto the tattered cloak. A stag, Baratheon, a southern raven in a northern storm. The man's name was Davrik, a low-born soldier-turned-messenger for King Gendry, or rather former king. He brought no royal seal, no orders, just a warning. "He's watching us," Davrik whispered, eyes darting around the tent like the snow had ears. "Your brother, the one on the throne, he sees things, knows things no man should." Jon leaned in, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I saw it myself," Davrik said. "He sent men after me. They burned the library at Storm's End, said it had too much memory, that's what they said." "Too much memory," Jon's stomach tightened. "Why you?" "Because I asked the wrong questions, about the wars, the ravens, the timing of it all. I saw the pattern, just a glimpse. And then they came." Jon's hands clenched into fists. And Bran, his brother, the boy he carried on his back through snowstorms, who couldn't walk but always saw farther than anyone. "Why would Bran care about books?" Jon asked. Davrik shook his head, half crazed. "Because history remembers. And he's rewriting it." Jon dismissed the man with food and shelter, but the damage had already been done. That night, Jon walked alone to the edge of the forest, where the old gods whispered through the trees. He knelt beneath a heart tree, its face worn by centuries of prayer and blood, and whispered, "What have you become, Bran?" The wind howled, not with an answer, but with a warning, and then came the vision. Suddenly, Jon wasn't in the forest anymore. He stood inside the Red Keep, the throne room twisted, vines crawling up the pillars, ash falling like snow. Atop the throne was Bran, not broken, not pale and hollow, but whole, powerful, smiling. And behind him stood figures Jon couldn't recognize, men in cloaks of shadow, their eyes glowing like embers. Bran's voice echoed all around him, low and calm. "You never understood, Jon. You followed honor, I followed time, and time always wins." Jon woke with a gasp, his breath visible in the cold. Ghost stood at attention, ears perked, eyes fixed on something unseen. The message was clear. Bran wasn't watching, he was calling, and whatever he wanted, it was coming. Tyrion Lannister had grown tired of drinking. That realization hit him one quiet evening in King's Landing, long after the city had been rebuilt, but not truly healed. The wine no longer drowned the guilt. It only dulled the questions. And lately, those questions had become louder, like old debts knocking on the door. He still served as Hand of the King, Bran the Broken, the realm called him. But Tyrion had begun to wonder if the wrong word had been broken. Each day at court felt colder than the last, and it wasn't just the long winter stretching south. Bran barely spoke during council meetings. When he did, his words were cryptic, detached, always vaguely correct, but never human. He would answer questions that hadn't been asked yet. He would mention things no one had told him. He never looked anyone in the eye. Tyrion had watched kings all his life, mad ones, kind ones, clever fools and ruthless tyrants. But Bran was something else, something empty. And that emptiness was starting to scare him. It began with the scribes. 3. of them vanishing within the same week. No explanations, no notes, just gone, their work conveniently unfinished. Records of the war, reports from the north, logs of the council's earliest decisions, all missing. Burned, some claimed, lost in a fire that hadn't left a single scorch mark on the stone floors. Accidents happen, Lord Grafton had said, sipping tea like poison. But Tyrion had learned long ago that in politics nothing happened by accident. One night, deep in the vaults of the Red Keep, he found an old scroll, one the scribes had supposedly misplaced. A detailed account of Bran's coronation, but something in the wording scratched at Tyrion's mind. According to this record, the vote had been unanimous. But Tyrion remembered hesitation. He remembered Edmure stumbling through a speech. He remembered silence before agreement, yet none of that was written, and at the bottom of the scroll, the signature of the Archmaester who had transcribed the event was forged. That's when Tyrion knew someone had rewritten history. He brought it to Samwell Tarly, now Archmaester in service at the Citadel. Sam, ever the idealist, dismissed it at first. "Maybe it's just a clerical error," he said. But Tyrion saw it, the twitch in Sam's brow, the way his fingers tightened around the parchment. He knew something. "I need the truth, Sam," Tyrion said. "Not the official story, the truth." Sam hesitated. Then, after a long breath, he whispered, "There are rumors among the Meisters about changes, gaps in time, things that one remembers writing, records rewritten, scrolls gone, and when we ask questions they tell us to leave it." "Who tells you?" Sam looked away. "Ravens come from Winterfell." Tyrion's blood went cold. "So Bran's rewriting the past?" "No," Sam said quietly. "He's erasing it." After that, Tyrion couldn't sleep. The past clawed at him. Bran had orchestrated the rise and fall of kings, allowed Daenerys to descend into madness, manipulated Jon into becoming both murderer and exile. And now he was cutting the strings behind the curtain. Tyrion tried to tell the council. Lord Royce scoffed. Lady Brienne looked uneasy but said nothing. Gendry avoided his eyes entirely. Bran just smiled faintly. "I trust you to do what's right, Lord Hand," he said. And Tyrion knew then this was no throne of mercy. This was a cage, and Bran didn't need guards. He ruled through truth, the kind no one else could see, and the kind he could erase, with a thought. Late that night, Tyrion found a letter in his chambers. No seal, no handwriting, just a single sentence. "He sees you." His hands trembled as he burned it. He no longer feared being wrong, he feared being right. Arya rode south beneath a sky thick with storm clouds, her face hidden beneath a worn cloak, her heart heavier than steel. She hadn't told Sansa where she was going. She didn't need to. Her sister had looked at her one morning across the map room in Winterfell and said only one thing: "Don't come back with questions, come back with answers." So Arya rode, following trails long buried, names whispered in dark corners, and signs that only someone trained in shadows would notice. Everywhere she went, she heard the same thing: silence, fear, and beneath it all, a strange reverence for a king who was never seen but always known. In Old Town, she found the first real clue. The Citadel, once buzzing with scholars and wisdom, felt dimmer now. Fewer acolytes, fewer books in the open shelves. When she slipped into the restricted section at night, using the same stealth that once brought her face to face with death itself, she found the truth hiding not in words, but in what wasn't there. Whole volumes on the long night, gone. Scrolls, detailing Jon Snow's lineage, gone. Entire sections on green seers, the children of the forest, and the ancient magic of wargs, gone. It was surgical, clean, erasure, at a level only someone with absolute knowledge could manage. Arya left that night with one scroll, an original copy of the prophecy of Azor Ahai, hidden beneath false scripture. The legend of a chosen one, a warrior of light who would defeat the darkness. She remembered Melisandre's eyes when she spoke of it. The Red Woman had seen something in Arya, had whispered that she would shut many eyes, brown, blue, and green. Bran's eyes were green, and now Arya wondered if that prophecy wasn't about defeating darkness, but about becoming it. In the Riverlands, she followed whispers of a man who remembered the fall of House Tully, a drunk bard who once sang in River Run's halls. When she found him rotting in a brothel in Maidenpool, he was half mad, but one thing he said chilled her. Lord Stark came to visit before the war ended. The boy in the chair spoke to my lord like he knew when he'd die, said he'd already seen it. Next day my lord rides out and never comes back. Arya pressed him. Bran was there before the end? The bard nodded, weeping into his hands. He told my lord the world needed him to fall, said it was time. That night, Arya stood by the Blackwater Rush and watched the stars. She remembered holding Needle. She remembered standing in the Hall of Faces. She remembered knowing death when she saw it, and now she wasn't sure if she'd been looking at death all this time. Without recognizing his face, she rode to King's Landing next, not as a Stark, not as a lady, but as a ghost in the wind. She climbed the walls by moonlight, moved through the alleys like shadow, and when she reached the Red Keep's hidden passages, the ones Varys once crept through, she listened. What she heard made her blood freeze. A raven was speaking, not cawing, speaking, a soft whisper from the shadows. The flame must be doused. Fire spreads. The fire remembers. Erase what it remembers. A maester nodded to the bird like it were a man. Arya turned to leave, but before she could step back, a voice behind her said, "You're not the only one who learned to sneak in the dark." She spun, blade drawn. It was Tyrion. He looked old, tired, and afraid. "I knew someone would come eventually," he said. "I just didn't think it'd be you." Arya stared at him. "You knew?" "I suspected," he replied, eyes haunted. "But I didn't want to believe it." "What is he, Tyrion?" Arya asked, her voice low. "What did Bran become?" Tyrion didn't answer at first. Then he said something she would never forget. "He's not ruling us." Arya frowned. "What do you mean?" Tyrion leaned close. "He's rewriting us." North of the Wall, the cold was no longer just weather. It was intent. The air had grown heavier, the snows sharper, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Jon Snow moved through the frostbitten forest with Ghost padding silently beside him. But something had changed in the wilds. Something ancient was stirring again. He had seen the warnings in the dreams, flashes of fire swallowed by ice, of red eyes in darkness, of the weirwoods bleeding without being touched. At first, he thought they were just visions, echoes of a past he hadn't buried deep enough. But now the trees were whispering, not just the wind rustling through branches, words, faint, indecipherable, like the groaning of the old gods remembering pain. Ghost would stop, stare at the heart trees, ears flattened, and Jon could feel it too, like a hum in his bones. The free folk had begun to avoid the ancient groves. Some whispered that the gods had been angered, that Bran Stark had taken too much. Jon didn't argue. He'd seen enough. He remembered the Night King, the force that had nearly ended everything. But that thing had been straightforward, in its way. Death made visible. Terrifying, but predictable. This was something worse. A shadow with a crown. A boy who had seen too much until his soul had unraveled and something older had taken its place. Jon had once believed in the future Bran had described. Peace, order, a realm ruled by wisdom, not ambition. Now he saw the truth. Bran hadn't come to serve the realm. He had come to overwrite it. Far beyond the wall, Jon discovered a grove long forgotten by maps. 12 weirwood trees growing in a perfect circle, their faces twisted not in sorrow, but in agony. Blood had dried on their bark. in streaks centuries old. In the center, a pool of ice that refused to melt even in summer. He knelt by it, drawn by something not his own desire, and when he touched the surface, his mind was ripped away. He saw 1,000 visions at once. Bran as a child, falling. Bran, under the tree with the three-eyed raven. Bran opening his eyes, but they were no longer his. He saw time unravel, threads pulled, choices nudged, lives altered. He saw the Mad King screaming, "Burn them all," because Bran whispered it. He saw Hodor break because Bran broke him. He saw Daenerys burn King's Landing because the whispers in her head weren't madness. They were guidance. He saw himself standing over Daenerys's body, and Bran watching through the eyes of a raven. He stumbled back, gasping, falling into the snow, his hands shaking violently. Ghost whined beside him. Then a voice echoed in the clearing. Not from a person, not from a creature, from everywhere. You weren't supposed to see that. Jon turned. No one stood there, and yet the voice came again. Familiar, calm, unnerving. You always were stubborn, brother. Jon stood slowly, breathing hard. Bran. No, the voice said gently. Not anymore. The pool began to ripple, slowly, like something beneath it had awakened. Why? Jon asked. You had everything. You were king. Why twist the past? Why control people? Because they never learn, Bran's voice said. Men destroy. Over and over, thrones, cities, each other. I gave them peace the only way it can exist, by taking away the choice to break it. That's not peace, Jon growled. That's slavery. Freedom is an illusion, Bran replied. Even yours. Jon stepped back, gripping his sword. The snow fell harder now. The sky had begun to darken, though it was midday. You're not a god, Jon said. No, the voice replied, but I killed the last one who tried to be. Jon turned at the sound. Tormund stood behind him, axe in hand, eyes wide with something between awe and horror, and beside him, 2 old men from the Free Folk carried something wrapped in black cloth. When they opened it, Jon's heart dropped. Dragonglass dagger, but not any dagger. The cat's paw blade, the very one Arya had used to kill the Night King. Jon stared at it, voice barely a whisper. Where did you find this? Tormund looked at the dagger, then back at Jon. It was buried under the tree, he said, the one that bleeds. Jon reached out and took it, feeling the cold seep into his skin. Bran had used this to end one darkness. Now Jon might have to use it to end another. In the heart of the Vale, beneath the shadow of the Eyrie, Arya and Tyrion took shelter in a crumbling tower, abandoned since the war. Wind howled through broken stones like the wailing of something ancient. Neither of them slept much. Too many questions, too many signs, and now too little time. Tyrion stood by the fire, swirling the last of his wine in a tin cup, though he hadn't taken a sip. Do you know what I keep asking myself, Arya? He murmured. If he's always known, what we would do, are we still choosing? Or are we just filling in the gaps of a script he already wrote? Arya sat on the edge of a stone slab, sharpening needle with long, slow strokes. I don't believe in fate, she said. Only people who hide behind it. Tyrion chuckled without humor. Then he's hiding very well. They had been tracing the damage, cities that had suddenly fallen silent, archives burned with no sign of struggle, nobles dying in their sleep with no poison or wound, no sign of war, only erasure, places where history had once stood proudly, now replaced with a silence so deliberate it chilled the bones, and every road led to Winterfell. Arya had once thought of it as home. Now she saw it as a tomb. A week later, a raven found them, black as pitch, eyes glowing red as embers. It didn't caw or flap wildly. It simply landed on the window ledge, cocked its head and opened its beak. Come home, sister, it spoke, not in Bran's voice, but something worse, an echo, mechanical, dead, Arya shot it with a knife before it could say more. Tyrion didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "He's not waiting anymore." They made their way north, quietly, avoiding roads, inns, eyes. The north still bore Bran's name with pride, but it was blind pride. His magic, his presence, hung in the air like fog. When they passed by Weirwoods, they felt watched. Not in the spiritual way the old gods were said to see, but in the way a predator observes prey. As they neared the neck, something unexpected happened. Jon found them. He rode alone, cloak tattered, ghost beside him as always. He looked older than Arya remembered, haunted but alive in a way she hadn't seen since before Daenerys. When she saw the blade strapped to his side, her breath caught. "The cat's paw dagger," she whispered. Jon nodded. "Found it buried in a tree north of the wall. Alongside answers I wish I never got." Tyrion stepped forward. "So it's true. He's changing the past." "No," Jon said grimly. "He's changing what people remember. The past's still there, but it's fading." Arya frowned. "How?" Jon looked away, ashamed. "Because he's not Bran anymore. Not really. He's what's left after the three-eyed raven died." The Greenseer's mind broke under the weight of time. Bran absorbed him, but the boy couldn't hold it. So something else did. Tyrion swallowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean the thing calling." "Itself, Bran," Jon said slowly, "hasn't just been watching the past. It's become it. Every memory, every whisper, every goddamn secret of every man who ever lived. It's not one mind anymore. It's a hive, a god of memory." Arya's eyes narrowed. "Then what does it want?" "To be the only story left," Jon said. "If no one remembers anything else, then it's not just king, it's truth." Silence settled between them, and for the first time, none of them had a plan, until Arya stood. "Then we go home," she said. "We cut the root where it grew." Jon nodded. "We kill him." Tyrion looked between them, his face pale. "Do you think it'll be that simple?" Jon met his eyes, steady and grim. "No, I think it'll be impossible." He looked at Arya. "But she killed the Night King." Arya stared at the dagger in Jon's hands. It felt heavier than steel. "No," she said quietly. "This is worse than the Night King." They moved by night. The north welcomed them with open arms, unaware of the blade hidden beneath Arya's cloak or the fire burning in Jon's eyes. Winterfell stood tall on the horizon, its towers piercing the grey sky, and in the Godswood, Bran opened his eyes and smiled. Winterfell was quiet, too quiet. Arya moved like shadow through familiar halls that now felt hollow. Jon walked beside her, slower, heavier. Tyrion stayed back, watching every corner like the stone might whisper. They found Bran in the Godswood, sitting beneath the weirwood tree, pale and still as snow. His eyes were open, green and endless. "I knew you'd come," he said softly. Arya stepped forward, hand on needle. "Then you know why we're here?" Bran nodded once. "To end what you don't understand." Jon's voice broke through. "No, to stop what you've become." Bran tilted his head. "I became what you left behind, Jon. What the world needed. I remember everything, and now, so will the world." "By erasing everyone else?" Arya snapped. Bran blinked slowly. "There can only be one truth." Arya drew the dagger. Bran didn't flinch, but the weirwood screamed. Roots burst from the ground, writhing. Shadows took shape. Faces from the past, from memory, from his memory. Ned, Catelyn, Hodor, even Daenerys. "Stop," Bran said, voice echoing in their minds. "You kill me, and the world forgets." Jon stepped forward. "Then maybe forgetting is better than living under you." He looked at Arya. She moved, fast as wind. The dagger slid into Bran's heart. His eyes widened, not in pain, but in surprise. "This Wasn't in the story, he whispered. Then he was gone. No scream, just silence. The tree stilled. The shadows vanished, and the godswood sighed. Like it had finally been allowed to sleep. Jon dropped to his knees. Arya just stared at the blood-soaked blade. Tyrion stepped forward, stunned. "Is it over?" Arya shook her head slowly. "No." She looked up at the tree. "It's just forgotten."